Let's move on to policy discourse. The federal government is in talks with the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group, on policy formation to utilize the capital market and other available funding options within Nigeria to fund infrastructure development through public-private partnership. We will also look at how imported inflation posed a significant challenge to the price stability of domestic products as the federal government planned to import food items to achieve food sufficiency nationwide. I am more captured by that word, imported inflation. Good morning to you, Blessing.
Good morning, Priye.
Good morning to you, Doc. Once
Good morning.
again.
Yeah.
In fact, I saw you, I caught your smile also when I was reading that. International Financial Corporation, yes. Mr. Olayemi Cardoso, the CBN governor, has been making comments, and recently when we see a story talking about how the CBN is mooting the idea of not having the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting just immediately because they felt the National Bureau of Statistics has not really brought back the report of the rebasing of the Nigerian economy, and they felt the economy and the Monetary Policy Committee was supposed to run basically on the data. It's supposed to be driven by data, but at the moment we are somewhat in the limbo. We cannot move forward as a result of that. Now, the last time we had the MPC was in November 2024. I, for one, am beginning to think of the negative impact this could have in the Nigerian economy and how investors would be just watching and not taking drastic steps or taking out an objective steps driven by those significant data for their investment and with other issues relating to their economy. Mr. Olayemi Cardoso is saying that we are moving away from the unorthodox system to the orthodox system of running the CBN. So I'm beginning to wrap my head around that. But he talked about the reforms that the current administration has had, the floating of the Naira, the unification of the multi-phased exchange rate and all of that. I see some advantage in that, but I want to be on the disadvantage, looking at it critically from another aspect. Imported inflation. The previous administration disbanded about 41 items from gaining forex so that we could put our hands together, all hands being on deck, to revive local production. This administration removed that disbandment, and there are some things in that 41 list that could pose a threat to the local industries in that. Before we really jump into that, well, with regards to this story, what caught your attention?
Well, what caught my attention mainly was the fact of the imported inflation, which the central bank is also talking about. And it's as if the CBN has come to that conclusion or the realization that its methods at trying to curtail inflation in Nigeria has not been effective. Having raised inflation rates steadily for 6 times consecutively, yet inflation is not abating because there are fundamental issues that have not been taken care of, which are really, some of them are not within the powers of the CBN to handle. Imported inflation, that's true, because we are largely an import-dependent nation, and so most of the consumables that come into Nigeria or that we purchase are imported. If we talk about food, even some of the food items that we consume are imported, some from neighboring African countries, some from other parts of the world. Take, for instance, wheat, which is a vital ingredient in the making of bread. It's imported. So when the global price of wheat goes up, it just makes sense that the price of bread here in Nigeria will go up. And those are staples, even rice. Yes, the Buhari administration was able to a good extent, ramp up Nigeria's production of rice, local rice, but it's still very expensive because of the factors of production that go into the production of rice. So, and we're not producing enough to satisfy the local demand. There is still importation of rice. So this is what the CBN means by imported inflation, because we are having to bring in some of the things. Even fertilizers that farmers use, many of them are imported. Yes, many of them are imported. You know, many of them are imported. So these things transfer to the cost. But basically, I think what the CBN needs to be able to do, and the federal government, is there should be some synergy between fiscal and monetary policy. Because sometimes it seems like the monetary policy is going in one direction and fiscal policies are going on another direction. So that way, it's making it counterproductive. Now, even when the Monetary Policy Committee meeting for this year has been postponed because they say the NBS, National Bureau of Statistics, have not yet released the data regarding the rebasing of the economy for Consumer Purchasing Index. Yes, we also have data on one hand being an issue. But when that meeting is held at the end of the day, what is going to change? Are we going to see a reduction of the monetary policy rate, MPR, which is the interest rate? Are we going to see an increase of it? So at the end of the day, it's not about having these meetings. It is what decisions that are made at the end of the meetings and how they affect the economy at the end of the day.
Doc.
Yeah, it's also the fact that we're in a hurry to succeed, and that's been a very major issue for me as one who is a student of policy studies. When you look at when we implemented structural adjustment program in Nigeria in the late 80s under General Babangida, at the same time, countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia were also implementing structural adjustment program in their own economy. But there was a whole lot of pressure from labor to students to market women. Oh, this is too hard. This is too strong. And what happened? We decided to say, well, if it's too hard, let's find a way to cushion it. And the whole argument why there was a need for structural adjustment was defeated. Like I say to people, structural adjustment was not bad in itself. It was only a means to look at the structural deficiency and inefficiency and see how to restructure it so that it can produce good results for you. So we just came out, academics, this is World Bank insinuation to inflate hardship, and we lowered the bar. And what do we get? We're getting down and down and down. Whereas other countries that stuck to their structural adjustment program, like Indonesia, have moved far ahead of us. With today, their per capita is about 5,000 compared to us who's struggling with 1,000 per capita. Every policy of government has its gestation period. You can't plant corn today and expect a harvest tomorrow. But the way we live in our environment here is that it is possible to plant a corn today and then be eating the fruit tomorrow. This is where people talk so much about policy inconsistency. When you set a policy on the ground, there's a need to watch and see what's the policy doing, how are people responding to the policy, what are the things that need to be tweaked here and there to ensure that you are running smoothly. But here, no, once you do a policy and after 2 days, people say, oh, we have not seen the result of this. We have not seen, and so grumbling on the environment and government again, because, like I said, is always wanting to be populous and then want to appeal to the sentiment of the people as, oh, I'm a listening government. Therefore, we have to back down on some of the critical measures we need to take to address some basic issue. Now, looking at CBN, it's supposed to be just a regulatory institution. So what is it to ensure that people are playing by the rules? And then looking at what are the issues or the challenges in terms of implementation, and then looking out for other policies that can address those implementations without necessarily distorting what is to be the issue. One thing that we have not addressed, which is the people's side of this conversation, is the fact that are we even looking at the demographic shift? Earlier on, we're having this conversation when we're looking at some of the things that made the headline, talking about everybody going to university. We are establishing more university. Recently, last week, we talked about University for Environmental Studies in Ogoniland. Now, and these universities are producing graduates. And by the reason of the certificate you hold, there's only one thing you can do, is wear suits and tie. And that's not helping productivity. So you are seeing an army of young people who move out from the rural areas because now they now have something to look for job. And they come to cities and the jobs are not available. I use my community every time I do this analysis. You won't even see young men to even now hire to do job for you. So what we are doing now, we are also importing people from other places to come become help for us. Because a lot of people who have had this university education feel it demeaning to do things that are to dirty the hands. And I think that's where we really have to start from. How do we reorientate our people such that we know that the whole essence of going to school is for us to be able to find means of livelihood. And that those means of livelihood don't live only in the cities alone, that we can actually have good life. And that will happen if government is extending social services to the communities where there are access to light, you have access to good roads, you are having access to internet and the rest of it, that people can actually stay within the communities to do things that they need to do for them to survive. So the problem of food importation will remain with us for a very long time until we address these basic issues.
Okay.
My worry, however, is this. While we're trying to, or not even trying enough, to fix the domestic issues, which is giving way for us to be import dependent, what would the CBN do? Because I think it should be obvious right now that there is need to reduce interest rates. Now, if that happens, it may, to a good extent, reduce the imports, the level of inflation, because business people will have access to funds at low rates. But I also think that there are other aspects, the other policies that government makes that are exacerbating these conditions. Now, there's been an increase in import duty, and we know that we're an import-dependent nation.
Okay.
The cost automatically will be transferred. And so we'll see that some of those goods that are imported, their prices will increase. So that's why I say, while there is monetary policy on one hand, the fiscal policies and other policies of government seems to be working at cross purposes. So except there is that harmonization, that what you're doing on one side, you're ensuring that the policies you're making do not water down the effects of the other policies that you're making, we will not actually see tangible results.
Okay.
But we see. We talk about fiscal policies. Basically, we're looking at the tax structures. We're looking at the tariff structures of government. Now, the tax structure of government, do we really have a problem that is saying that is affecting rates? I don't think so. Even look at what the government is trying to do in terms of tax reform. The whole resistance from the public is a big problem. That you say, okay, how do we reduce levies? How do we reduce charges on some items and products? But when you look at the food market, I think government has given so much support. Take, for example, importation of machinery for agriculture is zero duty. Even machine for industrial use has been zero duty for ages. Has it become a sufficient incentive? No. Because whatever thing that you are going to put in place, and one thing that you have to look at is the fact that, yes, there are some certain people that will have to do some certain things. How are we going to change the mindset? That's why I was talking last week about having, for example, university that suit the need of the environment. So even if you are going to set up an Greek university, for example, in my village, we are not going to be studying everything. There's no cocoa around my side. There's cassava, there is yam. Maybe the university should be made to study how yam we can improve its production, its yield, and the rest of it to increase food. So that we are now being very specific to where people can actually get value for what they're doing. Now, this investment has to be done by people. And so government has given you all manners of trade incentives. That, okay, if you want to set up some certain things, we have free trade zones all around in Nigeria. The last count, over 8 free trade zones. Now, what's happening in those zones? Nothing.
Okay, let's look at the ability of the government. For me, I see it as this current administration trying to remove the complete disbandment of the 41 items to be able to find Forex as not a very good idea. I would have preferred that the government maybe just deal with only the other 2 class or categories of things, which includes steel items and other goods. Now, if I look at this specifically, the food items, rice, margarine, palm kernel, palm oil, and vegetable oil, meat, and I'm startled, like meat and processed meat products, vegetables and processed vegetable products, poultry, including chicken, eggs, and turkey, tinned fish in sauce and sardines, tomatoes, and tomato pastes. Why? In fact, if I go down, you still see toothpicks, furniture. And why do we have to allow people who import these products into the country to find Forex?
Yeah, but that's the reason why you are
forcing. We shouldn't. There are other things like the sheets, the roofing sheets, the steel, where we know that we do not have that capacity, manufacturing capacity yet, because our steel industry is still moribund and dysfunctional at the moment in time. Why do we have to include all these things that we could almost find anywhere and everywhere we go? One other thing is this: the federal government engaging the International Financial Corporation, which, of course, a group in the World Bank, among the World Bank group, and its advice or its economic advice to the government of Nigeria, and I dare say to other African countries, is it going to add to us or take away from us? Why don't we depend so much on the African Development Bank to get this sort of economic advice to develop our public institutions and build public facilities in place through the public-private partnership and getting consultancy from the African Development Bank? Because from the way I look at it within the lens of global politics and global business-wise, I don't think we might be getting the best from the International Financial Corporation.
I don't think that IFC is loading over African countries. One of the things that you have to also rely on is the fact that many of these institutions that you see in the African countries don't have the capacity to sponsor research. I don't know how much of research that AADB is funding to do and really get data that can drive decision making. Today, decision making has become very scientific, and this is had to be dependent not on the rule of the thumb, but on the data that you are able to access. Most of these agencies, World Bank consistently in all African countries on a daily basis are collecting data. That even the government of these African countries have to rely on this data because we don't have data, our own independent data. And so it is on the basis of the data that they collect that they, of course, they are going to provide advice to you, because again, you also need them to give you some finance. ADB and IFC, of course, are also linking because they also need to supply money to ADB to even run and function, because the African economy is not able to provide the necessary funds for the African Development Bank to be able to meet the needs of the people in the environment. The problem is not with somebody giving you advice. The problem is you having the right intelligence to be able to decipher whether the advice that you are being given fits into your environment or not. So these are the truth that we have to deal with.
And these are challenges that the AFD, the African Development Bank, is well aware of, and they know it. I believe they even have credible information than the IFC.
Let me just land on this matter. The point I'm making is, if somebody gives you advice, you can choose to do or not to do with whatever advice that you are giving. But here is the fact that there are issues that we have spoken to on this table. Somebody had proposed this and said, look, you cannot use Ikoyi economics to determine policy for Shomolu people. And that's a problem that faces mostly policy formulation and implementation in our environment. If a man who has lived in Ikoyi and does not know what happened in Ajegunle, and we are making policy that is going to affect both people in Ikoyi and Ajegunle at the same time, chances are that you are not going to take into cognizance the peculiarities of the people in Ajegunle or Shomolu in that conversation. So you are looking at your environment where you live, and you are thinking that everybody is as resourced as you are. So this is a problem in terms of implementation. And I feel that taking a kilo, especially when we're talking about food inflation, and when you check the data, you find that the highest of the figure are in the rural areas.
That produce the foods.
That should produce the food. So the food inflation is higher. If you take Kogi, take for example, Kwara, take Ekiti, against Lagos, their food inflation is higher than what is in Lagos. Now, what do you think is responsible? And that is what I'm saying, that you see, when you are doing a study and a survey, you must understand that who is supposed to be feeding the city with food, and this food is supposed to be coming in a village. How many times do we really take statistics of what's happening in those remote villages that are producing food to see? Are they still in the farm? Is there anything that's troubling them? And if these guys are not able to produce food, now, which means, of course, some of them have to even rely on the food that is brought from the city. I remember in 1993, during Hope 94 protest, a lot of people were buying food, gari rice, to travel to their village from Lagos. So you see, the trend is reversing. Before now, when you are thinking Ijebu gari, you think that, oh, it's only Ijebu gari you're going to find. Now, today, we are receiving gari from Cotonou. So the real Ijebu gari is coming from Cotonou, not from Ijebu Ode.
Breaks my heart.
Now, those days, you see people going all around the villages plucking oranges. I saw people coming to my village to pluck orange, and they are loading trucks and truckloads of orange to the city. Today, the orange we drink, they are coming from Togo, they are coming from Cotonou. Pineapple used to come from Ekpoma, Benin Aziz. Big pineapple. Now, the pineapple we eat, they are coming from Togo, they are coming from Cotonou. Now, these are issues that we have not taken pain as a people to sit down to look at why is this trend reversing and what can be done so that we can go back to where we are, and then of course we are able to provide food for ourselves first. It's not just about taking items on the board of this thing we can produce it, but the truth of the matter is that is the capacity there.
Okay, let me say this. There are two sides to this. One, there is no capacity. or we don't have enough capacity to produce some of these items that are being imported locally. And two, because over time there's been the influx of some of those items from other countries, we now have this acquired taste syndrome, where we have tried here, and somehow we tend to relegate our own. And so there's been the preference for what is gotten elsewhere. So the sellers will give to those who are buying what they're demanding for. If you go to the market today and you want to buy pepper, the first that people even ask for now, they're asking for Ghana pepper and Cameroon pepper. Does that mean that we don't have pepper in supply here? But because we've had this acquired taste syndrome, where we tend to think that what we get elsewhere or what is produced elsewhere is better than ours. Sometimes there is a capacity problem. Sometimes it is about preference, the preference of the people. We have now become a people that prefer food produced outside. It's not as if that food that is produced from outside of Nigeria is better in terms of quality, in terms of taste, but they're more expensive and people go for them. And sometimes it's about a class thing. You just want to be associated with those who eat this or who buy goods that are produced elsewhere. So if it's textile material, for instance, and it's produced here in Nigeria, and you are wearing the one produced elsewhere, so it means that yours comes in more expensive, sometimes maybe not as expensive. You want to flout it. Oh, this was not produced in Nigeria, it's produced elsewhere. So there are different factors to it. But fundamentally, over the years, these little factors are built into one, that you have more of goods produced outside of Nigeria in Nigerian market. And for some local producers, it's a discouragement to them because they cannot compete favorably in terms of price with some of these products. And so that has also reduced the interest to continue. And we are not even empowering the agricultural sector with the kind of machinery that they need. There is also the urban influence. A lot of people want to be in urban centers, whether or not they have anything doing or they can afford the lifestyle that is required in urban centers. That's why you see that the urban centers are more populated. And in the rural area, you don't really see young persons in the rural areas. Once they get out of secondary school, some of them want to go join their siblings in the urban areas, whether or not they have anything to do. So this too is weakening the strength of the rural area being food baskets to the urban centers. And there's also the acquired taste syndrome, which is a problem in the society.
I think I would like to refer to one of the things Doc talked about, and he was talking about policy design, and how whenever the government comes up with a policy decision to want to design a policy to get this, that, and the other done, people think that the government makes policy today, tomorrow or in 2 weeks' time we start yielding the fruit and we all start eating part of it. One thing I will like, one that I refer to the previous administration about, is taking the guts to disband those 41 items from accessing forex, because Nigerians cried. They called Buhari all sorts of names and he refused. He said, "Why can't we be importing toothpick? What sort of insult is that?" Now, you don't have to. Palm kernel oil, red oil, it's annoying, heartbreaking that we are importing palm kernel oil from where into this country. The former CBN governor, Mr. Lamido Sanusi Lamido, said Nigeria is number 3 or one of the largest producer of cassava and yam in the world, and yet we are importing starch into the country. Of course, there is no correlation, and he couldn't see that. Let's look at the African structure completely. During China has almost taken over the industries in South Africa, and is doing the same thing, not just in Nigeria and other parts of the country, and they use it through the instrument of dumping. Blessing, you were talking about Nigeria have come to acquire this foreign taste syndrome. When we taste foreign goods, we want to remain addicted to it. We don't want to move forward. Ban them. Ban the Ghanaian pepper from coming into Nigeria. If Nigerians are going to cry, I'm sorry, it's for your good, cry, but this is for your good. Sometimes when the Chinese and the Western powers, or the economy rather, when they ship goods to African countries, it's not that those goods are not produced in Africa. There are forecasts and market analysis before they went into production had it that they are to meet a specific capacity in those climes where they are. And after they have gone to make those production, that's the capacity installed and the capacity that they forecasted. It was below that. So probably they produced more like 1,000 metric tons of whatever they are producing, and they saw that that particular client where they did their market forecast was only able to take in 200 or 300 tons. So because they don't want to go through the convention of waste, they don't know how to throw their goods away. They capitalize on the relationship they have with African countries, most especially China, with Africa and Nigeria. Then they ship these goods into our client. And you know what they do? They sell these goods cheaper than the way it is being sold in their country. And when they sell it cheaper to Nigerians, of course, that's the instrument and the technology of dumping. And when it is dumped right there right at our doorsteps, Nigerians start buying these goods. The government has little regulatory power over these goods. When we start consuming these goods, they now establish their presence here in Nigeria, and they begin to diversify into other economic aspects of Nigeria. That is why we see China going into mining. So if the government is making that policy, if the government is making that policy, then it should be able to look inward and say,
let's put some data on the table. So it's not just enough, because sometimes I feel that sometimes you think that those who sit down to write policy for us, maybe they are just dumps and they are not able to
they are not
think.
dumps.
Now let's put data.
I'm not even thinking that way that they are dumps.
Let's put data on the ground, because what we're talking about here is imported inflation. That's what we're dealing with.
Dumping is an instrument of imported inflation.
Palm oil you just mentioned. Trace the record. From 2015, Nigeria was producing about 940,000 metric tons of palm oil. And the consumption in Nigeria was 2.4 million metric tons.
How much were we producing again?
940,000 metric tons.
Below consumptions. Okay.
So, which is over 1 million plus, 1.5 million below our consumption level. So what that make happen for you, that if you have to rely on your local production, while we are not able to even meet the need of what we are supposed to be doing with palm oil at the industrial sector, even the price of cooking palm oil will be on the rooftop, which will be a driver of inflation. That's palm oil. Look at rice production. Look at meat production. And every other aspect. And that's the point that I'm making. That it's not just about that people are saying, no, you can ban items. I was asking somebody about 3 years ago, you ban items. A bag of rice is still coming in via the border, less than 40,000. And the one you are producing in-house is selling at 60,000. Nobody is going to think about it twice to smuggle from the behind, because 20,000 is massive. And that's why I'm saying, before you even embark on policy, you have to first of all look at, not looking at the symptom, we have to look at the root cause. And a Greek professor in Malaysia did one analysis some time ago. And he said, if you have an hectare of land and you plant rice in Nigeria, what you get is about 3 metric tons. But whereas if you do same farm in Thailand, you can get 16 metric tons in 1 acre. Why are they having higher yield than us? What are our research institutions doing to also increase the yield? So that even if I have a farm as small as the size of this studio, and I can get a bumper yield that can meet up those gaps. These are the things we're talking about. Some people had come and said, okay, yams produced in Ghana gets into America, get into London. Cassava produced in Ghana get into Europe, get into America. But Nigerian cassava don't get in there because at the point where, of course, we expose them to the lab, they say some of our products have carcinogenic ingredients. Now, what's our research institution doing to ensure that those things that are, those ingredients that are seen in the product that we have locally, that we remove them so that we can have access to international market? Now, these are the conversations that has to be done at the tertiary institution level. School of Agric, research institutions. And how are we funding these research institutions to ensure that they are not just moribund? There are a whole lot of research institutions in Nigeria that nobody pay attention to. Palm oil producing in Ifo. All those palm trees, they are all overgrown. What are we doing in terms of expansion? Yes, individuals are doing investment in terms of planting palm trees and the rest of it. But is it able to fill in the gaps of what people need? We have a population of over 200 million people. So these are the challenges. And so what federal government has done is that actually the problem is not about banning the substance, but then is giving preference to some people in terms of giving them access to forests at a very cheap rate. Now that you are not going to prefer anybody, that everybody is going to go there, like we say in our local environment here, go to hustle their dollar to do importation, then of course you have to find that now say, oh, you cannot import or bring in, will not become an argument that's sustainable, because now people have equal access to the forest because we are buying at one official market rate. So you are not giving preference to anybody. Right. So the whole idea of removing those items from those lists was because government was subsidizing some of all these things, and so they didn't want to say, okay, we have to preference this. No, let's not give preference to this one. We will give forest to this. But how has it helped the economy? It did not help. So if you do a policy,
but it kills local production.
No. What is killing local production? I don't think it's just import. It's much more than import, and that is the point that I have been making. The point I'm making is the fact that there's a trend, and our trend is the fact that we are investing so much to get our children educated. I had a conversation in 2016 with a director in NUC, and I asked, Madam, what's the yardstick of NUC accrediting more university when the one that are existing are moribund? And I even made one because we are giving license to all Dick and Harry to start up a university. He said two things to me that I cannot forget in a hurry. He said, number one, federal government can't fund university, so the way to go is private. And number two, that we are having so many people apply to JAMB every year, and the spaces that are available in the university is so small, and therefore we have to create opportunity for people to go to school. I asked her a question that day, and I said, Madam, if you live in a community where you have 100 people and you are a baker, you are producing bread, will you produce 1 million?
I think that's
so she took some time and was looking, and I said, how do you mean? And they said, this is exactly what it is. What is the manpower need, graduate manpower need in Nigeria comparatively to what you are producing and the admission that you are giving? Who is doing the analysis? He said she's not aware. Now, and this is a problem. So you cannot be producing graduates that you don't intend to work.
Okay.
So giving universities and setting up university here and there, that everybody will have equal access to education. And when we know really that by the time people finish this university, and it can not think of doing something else with themselves, having spent 4 years. And in most cases, if you are in public university and for 4-year course you have spent 7 years or 8 years, it will be very difficult for you to retire from that environment and then you want to go to do so many things. I was in Auchi Polytechnic in 2017 and I was speaking with the rector and I asked, what's the real strategy for the polytechnic education? He said, look, we don't have control. So what they are doing right now, they are doing vocational study. And I said, who are your target for this vocational study? He said, look, they are students. So people have come and I said, somebody stay with you for 4 years. He has done already for 2 years, 2 years, HND for 1 year. Now he's coming back. Now you are training him for 6 months, 18 months for what we put food on the table.
That's
and I ask, why didn't you just design that course so that this person, after he finishes his 18 months, he go into the society and find food on his table, rather than keeping that person for 4 years, and then you are saying the person has to come back to come and do a vocational training that will put food on his table. These are the conversations that we need to have at national level, so that when we are designing policy, we are also imagining in our head that, look, how is it going to impact the society in the longer run?
All right.
Okay, yes. I think that the problem really is not about people going to school or trying to acquire an education. It's a failure to structure how society should function and what we want to do with our education. So, if people are going to school, how have we structured the educational system that is very practical? We still have our educational system very much theoretical. And that's why people are studying courses that are really of no relevance in today's time and economy. So when they graduate, they basically do not have skills that can earn them a living. We have University of Agriculture. We have departments of agriculture, faculties of agriculture in different institutions. What are they doing? You still find that some of the graduates of these courses come out today and barely can do much. Now, if we want to ensure food security, what does it take for us to ensure food security? We still have the problem of insecurity even in areas where farming is the predominant occupation. We still have issues of access roads from where the farmers have challenges conveying their produce into the market. Those are challenges. Now, for the educational system, are we setting up a structure to ensure that for people who want to study agriculture, it's not the same way that they come out and then they go into subsistence agricultural practice? They can have commercial practice. Are we having it that schools, universities have their own farms so that you have a practical site for your students? While they're in school studying, they're also being productive. And there's a research institute attached to these farms so that if you want to have genetically modified produce or plants, you have that research, and those people who are making use of this research are also part of the system. It's widespread. You can even commercialize it for those who have private farms to have access to some of this research so that they can improve food security. So it's not necessarily going to school that is the issue. Is what do they go to school to study? Because society has also made it a thing of class, that if you do not have a certain qualification, you are looked down in the society. If you do not have a certain degree, you are not given the opportunity that others have, except you now have economic power, and so nobody's looking at what educational qualification you have. So you want to blame those who are building universities because there's a demand for it, or those who are going to school because they also want to have that status that every other person has. So it's a thing for us to have a structure around it that will ensure that it is not a status thing. So if you have OND, you're not a sort of a disadvantage to the person who has a BSc because there's a system that takes care of you. So except that is corrected.
This is the point I'm
except
making.
that is corrected, and we have a structural educational system where it is practical to fit for our needs. We would just be doing
but you see, you cannot get to that practical. You see, we cannot design an ideal state that does not exist. The truth of the matter is simple. And this is what states deliberately do. For example, in states like Germany, you have one university graduate to about 15 polytechnic graduates. And by its design, this one university graduate is supposed to be managing this 15. So you have staff, you have line. Those who are actually doing and they are producing. and you are training them deliberately with some level of skills at the polytechnic and monotechnic level, that these people are coming out from the school and all they do is that they can use their hands actually to do work. Some of them talk about technical education. Take, for example, the man who graduated from the university may not have what it takes to fix a car, but the guy who finishes from the polytechnic or a technical education should be competent enough. So what this person is going to produce is a supervisor. Now, when you go to the school system, you can take this data and analyze it, maybe after the show, so that you can understand the perspective. If you take, for example, enrollment into university, in University of Lagos, if you get medicine, law, computer engineering, and the student is scoring an aggregate of 80, 81, 82, in some cases 85. The aggregate that go to agric is 50, 40. What does that tell you? That people don't wake up deliberately that they want to go and study agriculture.
Because it's the reason they don't want to go there, because it's manually done.
That is the point I am making. See, by design. So you don't need to have 1 million university system to train people who are looking for jobs. And this is where we're talking about the synergy that should exist between the town and the gown. Right. The university should be producing for the corporate bodies. And where those openings are not enough, you cannot say because everybody wants to enter, therefore we must train everybody. And then we now go out and we're having so many of people who are carrying degrees but they don't have work. And now all the investment, I was saying somebody yesterday in my neighborhood, I said, please be careful how much you invest in education. Yes, so quality education. Also be thinking where these people are going to work. All this money that we are pushing to pull our children, especially in the private expensive institution, we can actually save it for them.
All right.
And invest it for them so that they can become entrepreneurs as soon as they are leaving the university and they are not going to work. And what that will mean is that you find a way. Because like people have said, there are two ways to deal with an inflationary economy where prices are going on the rooftop. The number one way is to increase your income, which of course is always difficult. And if you are not able to increase your income, the most potent way to do it is to cut down on your expenditure. Right. And I think these are the things that we need to learn. Cutting down on expenditure so that we are able to meet the needs that are basic to us and we are not overshooting, and then we are moderating the inflation on the environment.
Sometimes there is nothing to even cut because all the expenditure are on basic necessities. But I just want to quickly respond to what Doctor was saying about the polytechnics and the universities. So because there is that dichotomy and there is that one seems to be superior to the other, who wants to be the inferior one, in quotes? So except we have a structure where no one is actually inferior, you have people keep struggling and everybody wants to, that's why white collar job became the in thing at the time, because everybody wants to be the boss, the supervisor of the other.
Thank you.
Yeah, then you work hard to become superior. Whether you like it or not, in a race, everybody now competes. That's what
all go to the university.
Only one person wins the race.
They are on the desktop.
You even look at the way it is structured from day one. Okay. If you, and I think it's not that we are just saying that even in this UTME is now trying to address this issue. Go and look at the way the admission itself is structured.
Okay.
Now you no. When Blessing is talking about equality, because we have to understand some of these dynamics that it works. When we were growing up and going to school, you need 5 credits to go to the university. If you have 4 credits and without English, you can go to the polytechnic. If you have 3 credits, if you have 3 credits, you go to the College of Education. That's a strata. Now, you have now in UMT, if you score 200 and above, you go to university. If you score below 200, you go to polytechnic. If you get below 150, you go to College of Education. Even by that hierarchy alone, in terms of how you qualify to go to the system, has already defined. The point I'm making is that we have to deliberately reorient our society. That if I'm going to school and I said I want to go and study mass communication, the whole idea for me in studying mass comm should be either maybe I want to train as a cinematographer. That even when I leave university, I don't need to be looking for somebody to engage me. I can now become very active. So that I deliberately went into that course. Not because circumstances of admission has pushed me from what I intended to read to go and do another course.
Okay.
So this is the point, and this is where we have found ourselves, that when people apply for certain courses and now that admission can't come because it's competitive, now we are moving them to areas where they have no interest at all. Okay. And by the time they leave the university system, they are not even thinking of that area, because what is in their mind was that their first love.
All right. Okay.
That's why there has to be a restructuring.
Thank you very much. I know the university system, the polytechnic system has been at loggerheads, not only with the BSc, the university system that they talked about, and government in, government out, including the Nigerian University Commission, Academic Staff Union of Universities, Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics have been looking out for ways to solve this crisis. But is that what we really want? We want a situation where, like Doc says, where the town meets the gown, where the town and gown, complement each other. And if we develop a set of people who are both skillful, and we develop another set of people who are both intelligent to operate in the different sectors in our economy, we can both be the producing nation who produce for the consumption of the army of consumers in our country, to develop institutions to also manage that process for us to be productive as a people. And of course, the International Financial Corporation sponsoring research and development in higher institutions or in different institutions who are into that phase in the continent of Africa, being empowered in one way or the other to make sure that we produce our education system, our agricultural system, the engineering, you name it, science and technology, we are at par, even with other countries, so that we can marshal an economy that will be beneficial for all. Whilst we are looking forward to jump into the next topic.
Just to put it in perspective, that
you always want to put it in perspective.
It's to put it in perspective so that our viewers will understand why we have to dovetail into education. Because what we're actually looking at is how to reduce this imported inflation.
Yes.
That if we can create skills at home that can produce this locally, we will not need to be going abroad to bring inflation down. So we can actually manage it at home. Yes. Creating that competence lies in our institutions and our research institutes to be able to do what is needful to raise the adequate manpower to produce this thing locally, so that we are not over dependent on importation.